The president was shot, and I was in my dorm room. I'm Richard.
I'm Gary, and these are our incredible stories. All right, with such an incredible intro there, it was very spontaneous. We're talking about the 1960s again, I'm sure, and we're talking about you in your college days, and the president that, the only president we could be talking about that was assassinated during the 60s would be JFK.
That's correct, and let's start off by welcoming all of our listeners from across the United States and around the world. We are really happy to have you again with us this evening. In fact, we enjoy being with you each week here on the podcast. We feel you're a special part of the podcast, and frankly, we miss you when you're not there with us.
Mm-hmm. And those of you that are faithful listeners, we appreciate it, and those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we hope that you'll become faithful listeners too.
Yes, and so to get to your point, Gary, we are going back to the 1960s, and in the 1960s, my collection of childhood heroes was changing. So I was moving away from the Western heroes of my childhood and looking more at contemporary people. So in 1960, I was 15 years old, and I decided at 15 years old to get engaged in politics for the first time. So I signed up to work for the John F. Kennedy presidential campaign, and I was assigned the job of handing out campaign literature in my community for him, and it was specifically a flyer about what John Kennedy would do for education. Since I was a student, they figured I'd be perfect for handing out some of his educational material. So I recall distributing a small, very glossy pamphlet. I still have a few of them today, Gary.
Oh, do you?
Yep, and they outlined his thoughts about education if he were to be elected president. Now, as I look at those flyers today, I can't help but think how fast the sands of time flow through the hourglass. Sounds
like a soap opera.
Yeah, and well, you know how fast time flies.
You know what? I try not to think about it too much because, I talk about my summer camp experiences every now and then. I've been doing that job for 19 years, and it always shocks me whenever I run into somebody who was 5 or 6 at the camp, and now when I see them, they're in their mid-20s.
Yeah, it just reminds us that we're just passing through, and our lives go by in a blur, which means, folks, you really have to make good use of each and every minute that you have, because time is our most valuable treasure. Mm-hmm. And this is a profound thought when we're talking about John Fitzgerald Kennedy, because 3 years after he was elected president, I was a freshman in college, and his assassination had such a profound impact on me. It was November 1963. I still remember exactly what I was doing in my dorm room when someone shouted out in the hallway the horrific news. And it was on the radio, and it was just hard to comprehend the fact that someone had killed the president. That had never happened before in my lifetime.
Right.
So when an opportunity came up to attend JFK's funeral at Arlington National Cemetery, I was located down there in Southern Virginia, just a hop, skip away from Washington, D.C. So I jumped at the chance. 2 of my college buddies and I felt that it was such a momentous event that we just had to be there personally to experience history in the making. So we actually hitchhiked to Washington, D.C., because none of us as freshmen had a car.
Well, that sounds really safe there.
Yeah,
hitchhiking,
so
why not?
Back in that day, it was fine. And I'll never forget, a guy stopped to pick us up, and he was in this sports car that he crammed all of us into.
Oh, really?
And I was in the front passenger seat, and there on the gear shift panel, he had a little glass with a cocktail in it. So
Wait, hold on. You got in a car, a sports car no less, with somebody who was drinking?
Yeah, but not a bottle of beer or anything. He had a very upscale cocktail.
Oh yeah, no, it's nothing. It's not alcohol. It's a cocktail. Sure, that makes it so much better.
We got there safely, and
you're still here with us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now we were standing outside the church in Washington where the funeral was taking place, and we were waiting for the funeral cortege to pass by. And then, I'll never forget this, a ripple ran through the crowd. Lee Harvey Oswald, who was the alleged assassin,
right,
had just been shot dead by a man named Jack Ruby, and it was rippling all through the crowd as we were standing outside the church waiting for the cortege to arrive for the funeral. This is what we heard. I mean, it was electrifying news. I mean, the crowd seemed unable to comprehend the meaning of that.
Right. A lot happening at the same time.
Yeah, first of all, it was incomprehensible that someone would assassinate the President of the United States, and then, while you're waiting for his funeral, the guy who supposedly killed him gets assassinated himself. So that's where I was when we heard about Jack Ruby gunning down Lee Harvey Oswald. Then, right about that time, the vehicle carrying the Kennedy family members passed by, and another sight that remains burned into my memory to this day was little John, JFK Jr. Mm-hmm. They called him John. He was in this little beige blue suit, little child suit, sitting on someone's lap. I think it was a Secret Service agent. And he was staring out the car window at us, who formed the curbside crowd. And he seemed like he was really unable to, fully comprehend it all. I don't think he really knew what was going on, but it certainly was fascinating to see all those crowds that he was passing by. So once the cortege moved inside the church, we didn't have invitations, of course, to attend the funeral, so we then made our way to Arlington National Cemetery across the river from Washington and Virginia. And one of the things that I was really moved by was the flyover by the Air Force jets, and there was one jet missing in the formation, Gary, to signal a fallen warrior. And I also remember the horse that was pulling John F. Kennedy's caisson, and it had a military boot in a stirrup backwards, another symbol of a fallen warrior.
It had the boot was in a stirrup backwards.
Yes.
With nobody on the horse?
Right. So the boot was there backwards in the stirrup, which was another symbol of a fallen warrior. But the one that really stands out, of course, was that flyover with one jet missing, and it was all in precision flying that was going on. And so I was also really amazed when I spotted the French president, Charles de Gaulle. He was leading the whole group of dignitaries. He was the one leading the whole group of folks. And he towered over everyone that was beside and behind him. I've never seen a human so tall as Charles de Gaulle. And there he was, with his keepy hat and his brown uniform on, looking very resplendent, the president of France leading this delegation. And then I spotted the Kennedy family. There was Bobby Kennedy, there was Ted Kennedy, Jackie Kennedy, Carolyn, and John. And as for de Gaulle, I didn't know much about him. My only impression at the time was that he was an extremely tall person, as I mentioned. But I can't stop saying that he really towered over the people around him. It kind of reminded me of Marshal Matt Dillon, my Western hero played by James Arness. He was a super tall individual also. I remember seeing him in person at the Illinois State Fair when I was about 9 years old. So Charles de Gaulle was in that same category. He stood out, and you couldn't mistake him, and you couldn't miss him, no matter how large the crowd. So it was a very moving experience for me, between watching the caisson drawn by the horses and the all of the dignity that went into the funeral procession, and then everything that happened at Arlington afterwards. And the other thing that I remember is, as it was concluding there, everything was concluding at Arlington, I saw a Green Beret, a member of the Green Berets.
Right.
And he took off his Green Beret and he left it on something. I can't remember what it was, but in any event, he left his Green Beret there in honor of John F. Kennedy, our fallen president.
Wow, that's something else. That's a unique part of American history, and the fact that you actually got to be there and be a part of it is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, I think he left it near the eternal flame once the crowd dispersed, because we stayed there for the entire thing and then beyond. So I think this was after everything was done, and he laid it right there where the Kennedy casket was.
Did you take any photos?
No. I mean, we were all crammed into a small sports car. No luggage allowed. I don't know how we got back. I can't remember how we got back.
You probably hitchhiked back.
Yeah, we had to have hitchhiked back, but I don't remember that one because whoever took us back didn't have a cocktail in a sports car.
Yeah, thank goodness. Well, these kind of world events, they do leave a mark on us. You said you remember where you were, what happened, probably like it was yesterday. And I was thinking about September 11th when you were talking about that, because for me, that was a similar moment, because I remember every single detail about that day. I was a freshman in high school, and I remember the moment everything happened, and having somebody come in yelling that something had happened, that a plane had flown into one of the towers, and I remember them turning the TV on, and we all sat there captivated watching everything unfold in front of us in real time. And it was such a surreal moment and so unbelievable, and much in the same way you couldn't comprehend that somebody would shoot the president. We couldn't understand why people would fly planes into the Twin Towers. It was beyond any comprehension as to why anybody would do something like that. But it's funny how those things kind of stick out in our minds. And I know, like, for this year, there's going to be a whole generation of children and high school students, and even us adults, who are never going to forget the year 2020 because of all of the things that have happened alone in this year, and how that's impacted everything forever. These little things that it's like throwing a stone into a pond. The ripples just keep expanding and get bigger and bigger and bigger.
And
so,
with any life, if you're aware and think about it, with any life, there are a number of momentous occasions where you will always remember where you are when something happened. And for me, it was the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Sure.
And with a lot of folks that might be listening to us right now, it could be the 9/11 event that you mentioned. I think all of us remember that, who were around and old enough to
vividly
comprehend what was going on. And you're right. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people are going to look back at the year 2020, and they are going to vividly remember what they had to do to survive COVID-19.
Yes.
And so that's something that will be a historic memory baked into people's memory banks forever.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it's a little bit more reminiscent of stories that I heard from Grandma Lewis, who grew up in Texas during the 20s and 30s. And her family went through the Great Depression. And because of the area of the Southwest that she was in, they also went through the Dust Bowl. And I mean, that was a situation there where you couldn't step outside without having a mask on your face, because if you breathed in the dust that was in the air, it would get in your lungs and clot up. And then you couldn't breathe at all. And they would have to use things like turpentine and honey to, keep kids from suffocating on dust. So, and that was an event that, besides the Depression, that affected a whole generation of children. And to that, since we're talking about it, she grew up, and as we grew up, she never wasted a thing, because during that period of time, you couldn't afford to waste anything. And it was something that stuck with her all the way up until she died. She never wasted a single thing in the house. Everything had to be used, and things that were left over could always be used for something else. Ultimate recycling. And I feel like the things that we're taking away now from this year will stay with us for a long time, and you'll see a lot of things that people's habits and the way they live their life will be forever altered.
Exactly, and we won't know the true effect until 10, 20 years down the road. But,
exactly.
Once again, like I say, all of us experience incredible moments, and I hope that everyone who's listening to us is aware of their incredible moments, appreciates their incredible moments, and treats them for what they are, very, very special.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to share it with people. If you've got an incredible story,
tell other people.
Yep.
Right.
People are always interested in listening.
Yeah.
So, but as for now, I have to say once again,
I'm Richard.
And I'm Gary, and this was an incredible story.